Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me. We've just come back from a very productive and frankly emotional day in Ukraine. It was quite a privilege to be present at the 34th anniversary of Ukraine's independence. It was remarkable how President Zelensky singled out Canada for its contributions. For example, the first Western country to ever recognize Ukraine's independence. Canada was first off the mark in providing financial support after the invasion of several years ago. And he listed a whole series of other matters that were related to our deep and ongoing relationship. Our Prime Minister made it very clear that the Canadian people remain supportive of the Ukrainian people. They were extremely gracious and thankful for that support. So it was a very productive day, a very important moment to be there, and a great privilege. We had a series of conversations and discussions with the President, with my counterpart, the Minister of Defense, and other officials on different subjects. Donc hier était une journée spéciale, importante, de temps en temps émotionnelle, parce que c'est un moment difficile en Ukraine. C'était la journée de l'indépendance, mais quand même, les gens souffrent énormément. Les gens sont dédiés à la guerre. Les gens espèrent et se battent pour gagner cette guerre difficile, cette guerre illégale, cette invasion illégale. Mais c'était une journée productive de discussion en même temps. Les Ukrainiens étaient particulièrement, ils ont beaucoup apprécié, le président Zelensky l'a dit plusieurs fois, comment le peuple ukrainien remercie les Canadiens et les Canadiennes pour leur dévouement, leur appui depuis quand même longtemps. Le Premier Ministre Carney a bel et bien indiqué les relations entre nos deux pays vont jusqu'à la fondation de notre pays. Il y a quand même des décennies, plus que 100 ans. Donc c'était vraiment quelque chose de spécial et important. So it was a wonderful privilege, and I'd be pleased to take any questions you might have.
How much capacity does Canada really have to send peacekeeping forces into Ukraine after the war? And if not, what's a more realistic role we can play, such as training?
Well, the Prime Minister was clear yesterday about the question of having Canadian forces on the ground. He said that he wouldn't rule it out, and he was speaking in the context of a whole series of possible responses to continue to provide the assistance that we're providing. That could play, for example, or take the role of more intelligence support, more logistical support, equipment, financial support. We were there yesterday to, for example, review the $2 billion of financial aid that we are making available that was announced at the G7 meeting in Kananaskis, or the $2.5 billion to help the government in its operations, its day-to-day operations. So when he was speaking in the context of a whole series of possibilities, and that's very difficult to prejudge. We'll see how this evolves over time, but we are hopeful that peace will come.
Est-ce que ça veut dire que vous travaillez déjà sur des scénarios, vous comme ministre de la Défense, avec les commandants les Forces armées canadiennes? Est-ce qu'il y a des scénarios à l'étude à l'heure actuelle?
On travaille toujours sur les scénarios éventuels en Ukraine. On veut évidemment voir du progrès. On respecte ce que le président Trump essaie de faire. Le premier ministre Carney était très clair là-dessus. C'est une question de voir comment les choses vont se développer. L'Ukraine continue à se défendre bravement. Ils ont perdu beaucoup de monde. Hein. Les Russes continuent à poursuivre la guerre. Eux aussi ont perdu beaucoup de monde. On a été dit que c'est 1000 Russes par jour. Donc, éventuellement, les forces armées canadiennes suivent de très près tout ce qui se passe sur le terrain.
Et comment on peut être complémentaire sur le terrain si on n'envoie pas des troupes pour le combat? Comment est-ce qu'on peut être
Il y a plusieurs façons d'aider avec la situation. Il y a toujours la question d'équipement, il y a toujours la question de ressources, de financement, il y a toujours la question de renseignement, il y a la question, évidemment, de personnel puisse aider au niveau, par exemple, médical, équipement. Donc, tout ça, c'est à voir, mais là, on était là hier pour poursuivre la mise en œuvre du fonds de 2 milliards de dollars pour aider la question maintenant avec la défense de l'Ukraine. Et on verra comment ça va se développer.
Yesterday we got details on the $2 billion and how it being parceled out. And one section was $680 million in equipment for Ukraine purchased from the Americans. And can you tell us a bit more about that? Is that part in any way to these talks with the Americans of trying to improve the trade relationship that we've agreed to buy this equipment from America?
Look, the question of the bilateral relationship with the White House is one best put to my colleagues who are pursuing those discussions. What I can say is that the Ukrainians have worked with the Americans to provide a list of supplies that they require. And Canada has agreed to provide what's on that list. We're not the only country, we're the third or fourth country to join in that effort. It is part and parcel of the $2 billion assistance package for defense. And of course, those details will be rolled out in due course as those supplies are in fact forwarded to Ukraine, which will begin very shortly.
Can I just ask a bit?
I'm sorry?
Will we be buying more air defense systems through this contract?
And by air defense systems, you mean?
NASAMS.
That depends on what's available. Right now, the Ukrainians are pursuing this with the Americans. It's really a question of what's available on the shelf right now, what can be delivered. Timeliness will obviously is important, given the situation. What we have seen yesterday, which I can share with you, is we've learned that this war is different perhaps than others in the sense that drones have now taken on an extremely prominent role. And so we were proud to sign an agreement where Canada and Ukraine will be cooperating on the production of drones. That's to be developed, that's to be implemented. It will happen fairly quickly. So the question of all the overall assets that are being provided is one to be determined between the Ukrainians, ourselves, and our American suppliers.
A bigger picture question. Can I just ask you a bigger picture question? I've been following prime ministers on overseas trips for 25 years. You've been watching it for your long parliamentary career. I can't recall a defense minister accompanying a prime minister on 4 bilaterals. No defense summits, no NATO summits. We're talking defense, we're talking trade. Can you reflect on the significance of a defense minister accompanying a prime minister on 4 bilateral visits through Europe?
I think what it indicates is that the landscape has changed. I think Canadians know that the landscape has changed, that the geopolitics are changing, that the threat landscape has changed. And as a result, we continue to pursue defense, security, and intelligence discussions right around the world. This is something that we're seeing, frankly, from my 3 months now on the job. I see this happening quite regularly amongst defense ministers joining heads of state. And so I do my best to provide whatever counsel and advice I can to the Prime Minister. I meet with my counterparts. We're building relationships, and it's also, frankly, part of our diversification efforts. The Prime Minister was very clear that on the defense front we would be diversifying, which is why we signed on to the European Union arrangement, which is why I'll be meeting with my Polish counterpart here later today, which is why I spent several hours with my Ukrainian defense counterpart, and we will be doing that on an ongoing basis.
So,
Ukraine's defense industry is in the process of setting up drone factories in Europe. Will we be having a Ukrainian drone factory in Canada?
Look, that's to be resolved. What we did do yesterday was agree that both countries would cooperate in the manufacturing of drones. Obviously, Canada has a very deep engineering and technological talent pool to draw on, and we'll see how that evolves, whether that's particular components of drones or whether that's the actual manufacturing of drones. That remains to be seen. But we also did learn that the Ukrainians also have developed extraordinary capabilities on the drone front. Of necessity, we can all agree. That's something that's going to also benefit Canada in terms of the long run.
Au Canada, on est en train de...
Have you read the military portion of the report? What's your takeaway? And isn't it time we get on with this decision?
The Prime Minister was very clear by the end of the summer, which is September 21st, he'll have a decision and more to say about this. Right now, the F-35 review, forgive me, is underway.
Il y a un accent vraiment militaire à la tournée en ce moment. L'accent militaire, et ça tranche avec l'image des casques bleus du Canada. Est-ce que ça veut dire que l'image du Canada, auprès même des Canadiens, va changer? On va être beaucoup plus axé sur le militaire, plus la défense au cours des prochaines années, et que vous allez avoir un rôle à faire, à jouer pour vendre ça aussi aux Canadiens qui vont voir les dépenses militaires augmenter aussi au Canada, ou peut-être au sacrifice d'autres programmes.
Nous avions été très clairs là-dessus. La plateforme libérale, pendant la campagne, a annoncé que nous avions l'intention de poursuivre des investissements majeurs dans la défense. Et mon boulot, mon travail, c'est la mise en œuvre de ce qu'on a annoncé, ce qu'on poursuit On a annoncé il y a 2 semaines l'augmentation la plus significative au niveau de paye dans les Forces armées canadiennes depuis une génération. On est en train d'acheter l'équipement nécessaire. Je fais une tournée. La semaine passée, j'ai visité 6 bases militaires pour voir exactement ce qui se passe sur le terrain.
Mais comment
On investissait dans le logement, dans l'eau, dans l'assainissement. Il y a du progrès à faire et je pense que les Canadiens et les Canadiennes le savent.
Mais comment rendre ça une priorité pour les Canadiens? Les Canadiens n'ont pas tendance à vouloir dépenser en défense. Est-ce que vous êtes ici, en Europe, essayer de vendre ce concept-là aux Canadiens?
Non, nous sommes ici pour poursuivre exactement ce que nous avons annoncé aux Canadiens et Canadiennes. Et c'est la mise en œuvre d'un projet dans le domaine de la défense qui touche non seulement les investissements dans nos forces armées canadiennes, dans l'équipement nécessaire, notre rôle à l'international, la continuation de la protection de l'Ukraine, mais aussi pour essayer de générer beaucoup plus d'activités économiques dans ce domaine. Et c'est exactement pourquoi nous créons au Canada une stratégie industrielle pour la défense, la première dans l'histoire du pays. Nous travaillons d'arrache-pied avec nos partenaires, avec 500 compagnies canadiennes présentement, avec notre communauté universitaire pour poursuivre la recherche, etc., etc. Donc, non, nous poursuivons exactement ce que nous avons dit que nous allons faire. Et depuis 3 mois, on a quand même pris beaucoup d'élan.
Last
question.
Capacity to do more in Ukraine. Given in a couple of days we're going to be in Latvia, 2,000 troops there. It's taking up a lot of resources just to do that. Is it possible to do more or retap there?
I have confidence in the operational capacities of the Canadian Armed Forces. They are constantly monitoring our presence in Europe, our forward operating base in Latvia. We've just come back from Ukraine. We were able to assess and see more clearly what the needs are. And that's a takeaway that we're bringing back home to defense. And the Prime Minister will be speaking about this in more detail.
Thank you. We gotta go. We gotta go.
Murray, last one for Murray.
The Canadian military has clamped down on the release of information to do with Operation Unifier. Has the threat level against Canadian troops during training for Ukrainian soldiers increased?
Operation Unifier has been a very successful operation for Canadians and our Canadian forces. President Zelensky reminded us yesterday that he was very grateful that we've trained over 45,000 Ukrainian forces members. That work continues. It's been very successful. Obviously, there are some operational matters that I can't get into, but I know that the Chief of Defense Staff and her team are reviewing constantly our presence in Europe, and they'll have more to say about that in due course. Thank you very much.
Merci,
Thank
monsieur le
you.
ministre.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur le ministre.
Merci, guys. Yes.